like clock. I can't stop. Fuck around, make my 40 pop. No popcorn, I pop pistols.
Boruto episode 161 preview. Alright guys, the Kata actuation arc is actually heating up, and now we get into the actual plot and the meat of things, excluding the obvious Kata organization members that Boruto and the rest of Team 7 are going to eventually deal with throughout this arc. Now first things first, I do want to read over the spoilers mainly because there is some things that we know now that brings new meaning to a lot of the stuff in these spoilers. Boruto and his comrades learn that it's, which is the Hashirama cells, in the hands of a very rich person who resides in the prisoner's castle in the land of silence, and so Boruto and the others are planning on retrieving them. However, there are some others who are going after Hashirama's cells and trying to steal them as well. Now at first glance, when I originally read these spoilers, I basically said that it was a no-brainer. It was going to be Victor and it's going to be Deepa. Now in my opinion, based off of the last episode, other characters have also potentially came into play who actually want the Hashirama cells. Now small part about the last episode, some of you guys probably didn't necessarily catch it, but Mujino actually said that he noticed some people from small villages in the land of silence, and Mujino hypothesized that they were there because of the Hashirama cells. Now it's very possible for those guys to also be lurking around the very rich person and trying to steal the Hashirama cells as well. It's going to be very interesting to see how strong those guys are, and specifically what other villages they are from as well. One of the small stories over the course of the past couple of episodes is the fact that someone actually stole the Hashirama cells from Victor. Well, the person was in the lab and he stole the Hashirama cells and he brought it to the land of silence. Now I didn't necessarily talk about that in my review, mainly because it wasn't necessarily a lot to talk about. It was just someone who stole the Hashirama cells, and of course that was going to be the overall big plot. Now I really thought that right there was possibly going to bear fruit, but it turns out that I was wrong, mainly because in the last episode specifically, the shopkeeper said that he was pretty much killed, mainly because he was walking around with a whole bunch of money after he sold the Hashirama cells to the people. One of the things that I find extremely suspicious is the fact that we didn't necessarily see Konohamaru or anybody else analyze the name and the picture on the ID. It could have possibly been someone that looked a little familiar, but because we didn't necessarily see who exactly who it was, it possibly means that they have no idea who that character is, and it possibly means that he is actually in fact dead. But the spoilers also go on to say, in addition, there's been suspicious movements from Victor, the pharmaceutical company president whom Boruto and his comrades happened to meet the other day, as well as from a mysterious man named Deepa. Now just from my point of view, this kind of confirms that they're actually going to be in the next episode. Now as I spoke about before when I actually did read the spoilers for the first time, it's going to be all about the impact that they make in this episode. If they just make a cameo and we see them and they're just like in the shadows and we never really see anything from them, it's not necessarily going to be that entertaining, especially from a character like Deepa, which already we've seen a cameo from him. He looks extremely creepy, he looks extremely weird. It's very likely that Deepa is going to be the stronger one between Victor and Deepa. Of course, Victor's a very old man, so it probably wouldn't necessarily be a surprise, but regardless, I feel like Victor, specifically Deepa, needs to have an impact. They need to have some speaking roles. They need to possibly beat up some fodder characters, something like that, or possibly some ninjas from other villages that are trying to snoop around and find the Hashirama cells. And as I spoke about before, someone from Victor's company stole the Hashirama cells and sold it to that very rich person, so it would not be a surprise if Victor and Deepa both have the drop on this very rich person. They could possibly swoop in and take the Hashirama cells whenever they want. Now getting off of the spoiler content, what we left off in the last episode was a super weird scene where we seen the butler pretty much infected with the Hashirama cells. It still surprised me that the Hashirama cells is like the plague nowadays. Back in Naruto Shippuden, it was like gold. Like if you had it, you were automatically that much stronger, but now it's like none of these characters can actually handle it. But regardless, this butler right here, supposedly he has a mission for Team 7 and the rest of the guys. If they don't necessarily treat him, everything is bungled. They have been had. Now I can't believe I didn't really talk about this when the episode actually came out. The rich guy is an absolute savage. I'm talking straight Mamba mentality. Do you know how cold-hearted you gotta be to put someone's life on a line just to test a scientist to see if the scientist is who he actually thinks he is? I mean, you don't even understand. The guy could have just gave my man's like a simple virus or something and then asked the scientist to cure him or something like that. He gave him arguably the most deadly illness that is around the land of silence as of right now, the Hashirama cell. Literally put the poor butler's life at risk. Should have put the butler's barber's life at risk, but that's besides the point. And it just seems like a sad situation because from what we see from the past episode, the butler's a simp. He's completely simping over this rich guy. Now, I don't really know if it's a man or a woman, so let me just get that out of the way. It could possibly be a woman. It could possibly be a situation where this butler is actually simping over this rich person. Maybe she looks extremely good. Maybe it's a he. He looks extremely pretty. We have no idea at this particular point, but what we understand is that this butler has an affinity for this rich person, and the rich person didn't really care at all. He just said, hey, I'm about to infect you with this Hashirama cell. If this person ain't who he really is, you could say goodbye. Now, I don't necessarily want to skip to the end of the preview, but for the sake of this particular conversation right here, we're going to have to do so. We see the actual scientist in the preview. Now, I don't know if that's still Konohamaru masquerading as the scientist, but regardless, we see the scientist. It's going to be very interesting to see how they get out of this situation. Are they going to have the scientists actually work on this guy? If that's the case, I'm pretty sure they're going to have to finesse and finagle away for Konohamaru to switch out the scientists. And also, we have to get the scientists on board, because as of right now, we understand the scientist isn't necessarily on our side. The scientist is literally being held captive by Team 7. If he sees a way to get out of the situation safely, even if that means backstabbing Team 7, he would do so. Now, what I originally thought would probably be a very good idea is Konohamaru taking the butler back to the crazy doctor. Now, in retrospect, that seems like a stretch, man, because they're extremely far from the actual doctor itself, and also it would be extremely suspicious for them to just say, hey, I can't do it, but one of my friends could do it as well. And that would pretty much mean that Konohamaru and the rest of Team 7 basically failed the mission. The mission that Team 7 was given by the extremely rich person who actually has the Hashirama cells is to cure his butler. If they don't necessarily cure the butler, then he's going to automatically assume that they are not the scientist, which is very smart, man, because they are actually not the scientists. That's Konohamaru and a transformation jutsu. Now, in the preview, it seems like somehow, some way, Team 7 actually completed that mission. And I say that because in the preview, we see the butler, he's upright, he looks good, he's basically showing everybody around, God bless his barber, but that's besides the point. It looks like he's in good health. And also, it looks like he's showing Boruto and the scientists, quote unquote, around his estate, possibly to meet this extremely rich person who actually has the Hashirama cells. But of course, that right there might actually be a flashback, so we can't necessarily put anything in stone, but for right now, what we can say is that is actually a very good sign. Now, also in the preview, what we did see is the scientist basically working on Mitsuki and the other female. Of course, she's trying to build up antibodies from Mitsuki's body to basically help out everybody else who is actually infected with this Hashirama cell. Now, I know Mitsuki is a very critical part of Team 7. He's arguably the strongest person on Team 7, including Konohamaru, but that's besides the point. But I feel like if Mitsuki doesn't necessarily have anything to do with this particular situation, especially in the next episode, I don't necessarily want to see a lot of Mitsuki content, because he's not necessarily progressing the plot. Of course, if they find the cure, that's well and good. That's extremely helpful for all of us, but I really hope that they just relegate him to, like, I don't know, 2 minutes of screen time. For entertainment purposes, I wouldn't necessarily mind it because I think the doctor is hilarious, but I think just for plot purposes, we should just keep that at a minimum. One of the things that I'm super hopeful for is Mitsuki actually making a very huge impact. Maybe Team 7 is in a very rough spot and Mitsuki comes in last second and saves all of them. That right there would just be amazing in my opinion. But let me know what you guys think about this episode in the comment section below, and give me what you guys are mostly looking forward to. Is it going to be the butler possibly getting better? Is it going to be Konohamaru trying to masquerade as a very skilled scientist? Or do you guys look forward to that crazy doctor trying to heal that random girl? One of the things that I'm definitely going to be looking out for is, of course, the Kata organization members. What type of impact are they going to make in the next episode? We all know it's going to be very cool just seeing them in the episode, but I really do want to see some sort of impact in the next episode. But let me know what you guys think. It's me and boy Bar B, and we out.
It's a knife.